Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you for your truly caring and inspiring leadership of Alumni Council, of the Alumni Association, and your contributions to the college in so many other ways, including that of being on the board. So thank you, Kevin, and to each of you, welcome back to Swarthmore, which I hope you regard as your second home. And I want you to know, on my behalf and on behalf of the entire Swarthmore community, how much we appreciate your being here today. It really means a great deal to us. I look forward to one more year building together on the remarkable tradition of excellence of this college. And I really look forward to this session, because every year this session is truly one of the highlights of the year for me, in the sense that I get to see the alums that this college has produced, and I get to hear what's on your mind, and most importantly, maybe, I get to weave into the answers that you'll see me create, the kinds of things I think you need to know about, or I hope that you want to know about this truly remarkable institution. So let me just start with some questions, and I will try to weave those things that might amplify the questions into my answers to them. Yeah, sir. The gentleman is a little concerned about what he perceives as jarring architecture in the new dormitory, that's the pair of dorms that have been built down near the railway station, and wondered if, in fact, we were going to add some trees in order to disguise the buildings. I'd say that actually, in terms of planning where the building should go, we had a really interesting campus planner who basically said that the point of the Parish Beach and leading up to Parish, architecturally speaking, and I think he was right, is to build buildings along the right side and then to leave the left side, where Sharples is and Clothier is, as open as possible. So we don't create the sort of traditional quadrangle of a campus, but rather have this sense of structure, and in fact a tower in the dorms that matches the Tower of Clothier, and at the same time the sense of expanse, which allows the buildings to fold into the environment of campus. And I think we've achieved that. Now, one thing that does happen here, I think, is that over time, I remember when art glass, which is glass that changes color depending on the lighting and the perspective from which you approach it, in Coburg Hall was jarring at first. And I said, we got to take this whole hall down, we got to replace the art glass. And over time, we got to realize that as long as it fits into the breadth, the kind of context of a campus where the buildings recede into a tranquil and arboretum-infused environment, that difference can actually be accommodated in the architecture. And I think in time, because the stone is interesting, I can't prove it, and we'll see, definitely come back in 5, 10, 15 years, and then see if that happens to you. But yes, it is going to be landscaped, and the landscape is going to grow. And as the landscape, let's say, between Coburg and the Performing Arts Center has really come up to create an alley, which is what the architect originally called it, that doesn't give you the feel that these two buildings are right next to each other, like on a highly constructed block in a major city.
I would just add that I do think Coburg is beautifully done, and it just fitted really well the way everything.
So wait, he's saying that he thinks Coburg is beautifully done, and I say wait, and I hope you'll think the same. But if not, we will gratefully receive donations of trees. We're here because talking to parents, which has always been here, and talking to alums, I think it was last year, the fact that we had the view of the trees and the crumb added importantly to the experience. And if we don't see it that way, then we'll go back there next year. But this room adds, because of the light, and the sense that we're really part of the campus, adds, I hope, extra energy and sense of joy to the occasion. That's the reason. The question is our relationship of fundraising to corporations as opposed to individual donors, and whether individual donors are involved in those relationships. The gentleman saw that in the Science Center there were plaques to specific corporations. Our greatest fundraising, and many of you are to be thanked for that, every one of you, and since 87% of the alumni body gave to the campaign, I'd say, and of those, even a higher percent come back to Swarthmore, so I bet 98% of you are in part responsible for that building. And it is an amazing building, and where it puts us in science is terrific. We do all those things. That is, obviously, we cultivate individual relationships with donors, which are the most significant part of our fundraising. We also get grants, foundational grants from corporations that give grants to Swarthmore, and our corporation and foundation office seeks those, which are grants more for academic activity or for buildings rather than direct contributions in the way that a donor would. We've had donors in some of these corporations that get matched by their corporations in their grants, and then we also clearly tried to go directly to corporations. The problem has been that that's harder. But I really believe, sneaking in something in a very overt way, I think that, this school has really come a long way, and I'm totally proud of it, in terms of its increasing reputation for distinctiveness and the degree to which that reputation has spread around the country and the world. I talked on last Saturday in my graduation talk about 3 dimensions of our excellence. 1, analytic rigor. 2nd, a real commitment to sensitive and complex ethical judgment. And 3rd, real concern for the broader conditions of humanity. And putting those together is very important. So there's a synergy between analytic thinking and how do you contribute to the broader conditions of humanity, and ethical thinking and its complexity and how do you contribute that to the broader conditions of humanity. And this is all going to your answer, although I may not suspect at this time. I really believe that because of that distinctiveness and the distinctive excellence it has produced over generations, that in the current world, what Swarthmore represents is so special that as we go out to constituencies that don't know us, including corporate constituencies, there will be more and more chance of really being effective in the developing world in that constituency. The people who have known us have been fantastic in supporting this institution. It wouldn't be where it is today without all of you and without that support. But people who haven't known us have been less, inclined because they didn't know what was special about this. And you look at Kiplinger's letter, for example, this year, and it says this is the best value in higher education in the country. Well, then they say, well, why? What makes the value? Is it just that it's cheaper? Is it just that you get more faculty per square inch? What is it that you get? And when people analyze that, I think they really understand that it's about bringing the Adelaide tradition, as it were, and the Quaker tradition together to form this sense of analytic rigor, this sense of ethical intelligence, and this sense of commitment to humanity. And I really think that's rare in education today. That's not what the mission of most schools is about at all, or what graduates consistently display. And so I do think that there is a real future in that area of fundraising as our new Vice President, Steve Bear, and his wonderful staff will continually pursue with the help of all of you and the board. But if you know corporations that are attractive for that reason or any other reason, obviously we want to know. Yes. The question is that the no loan policy is a lovely policy as you listen to it because it speaks to generosity, but is it a good policy? And does it in fact create a situation where we're attracting students from other schools for the wrong reasons, for financial reasons, for example, as opposed to for their commitment to analytic rigor and ethical intelligence in this kind of community?
I couldn't have said it better.
Since you said it, there is no comparison needed. First of all, the reason for the no loan policy, and for everybody to understand, we've always had a major commitment to financial aid, as you know. And right now, out of the full tuition of $47,000 per year in tuition moving board, 50% of our student body is on financial aid, just about 50%, depends on each class. And the average student in that gets $34,000 in aid. So we have a major commitment to financial aid, and therefore a commitment to providing access across the country, across class, across background, and so on, to create the diversity that we have. And we really believe in this. One, to me, problem with our financial aid policy was that it still does not, and it can never create total equality between students on financial aid and one's not. Clearly, if you come from a family who has means, you're in a much better position later on to feel secure and so on. You don't have as much obligation to look for jobs that will compensate highly and so on, and you don't have the freedom to do things while you're at Swarthmore that people on financial aid, I mean, you have the freedom that people on financial aid may not. But we've really always, and I know you go back to your experiences, tried to create an environment where the experience was as equal as possible. So no events cost money. For foreign study, as soon as I came in, foreign study was funded by financial aid to any program you wanted to go, so a kid can choose comfortably, internships, so on. We try to make sure, science is much more expensive. We buy one NMR for chemistry, and it costs $400,000 for 6 students, and we don't charge them $50,000 extra for using the NMR. Then let's say, reading one very, very long novel in English, which would cost a little less money. Especially if it's on, I'm not being facetious, I really mean it. These are the values of the school. And I think it's really right. And when loans were at the level, because we had kept reducing them, to only $15,000 for the 4 years. That is a little less than $4,000 a year. So it wasn't a huge amount of money. As an aggregate, it's a lot of money, but for an individual student, it was only, let's say, a little less than $4,000 a year in loans. That's the most we asked for. But it really had what I see as a damaging effect on that sense of equality on campus. The fact that a student has to knows that when he or she graduates, there's going to be that accumulation of $15,000 in addition to whatever graduate loans or professional school loans or business school loans that he or she takes out. And that really did not fit with our values if we could afford to deal with it. Secondly, when a student leaves Swarthmore, the difference between having a $15,000 or $16,000 burden and not really makes a difference in their thinking about what career they might want to go into. And I think that was not what we wanted. Thirdly, Princeton did it, unfortunately, I want to take credit, but Princeton did it way before we did. So we're not going to lose a student to Princeton or gain a student from Princeton because we have this policy. And unfortunately, if you worry about competition, but fortunately, if you worry about the nation and higher education and all the kids that apply to Swarthmore, all of our comparable schools are now starting to do the same. So it's not going to have a real effect on competition for students almost at all. And it hasn't, and that's not why fundamentally we would do it. There are a lot of things we might do for competition that we would never do if the values did not impel us to do them. And this one was a value statement that is building on what we've done before. I'll give you some other examples. We're really trying to move towards need-blind admission for international students. Right now, we have need-blind admission, that is, anyone who applies domestically gets in, and we promise we'll pay whatever aid they need. And we never look at their financial resources when we choose one student versus another. But with international students, we have not done that. We've taken international students up to a certain level of cost, up to 10% of our financial aid budget, and once that's exhausted, we only take international students who can afford Swarthmore. Now, we just haven't been able to afford to deal with that, but we have a fundraising drive just started. That's an opportunity for me to leave this in. Fundraising drive, which is really important to try to pay for 3 things. One, the cost of this commitment to no loan policy, which in fact is a $40 million addition to the endowment that you need. That produces $1.7 million a year, and that's what it costs to eliminate the loans. We also have a problem in financial aid, which is that, as you know, in this country, the cost of tuition and fees and of everything else that we have to pay for, and therefore of tuition and fees, continues to rise, actually, more than inflation. And the income of our poorest families doesn't even rise at inflation. So there is an increasing discrepancy between what our poor families can afford and what tuition and fees increase. So we have to continue to raise money for financial aid, even to keep things stable, just to make up for that increase. And thirdly, we're really committed to moving need-blind admission towards in the international area. And lastly, just to go towards the future, we're in the middle of the planning process now as to what's most important. I know I wrote to you all about that, and I got some wonderful suggestions from you. And among those suggestions, and among the discussions that we're having, are, for example, eliminating one of the summer financial expectations that students on aid have. Every student is supposed to make a certain amount of money during the summer to help in his or her help his or her financial aid package, and that's expected. And that means that a student can't, for example, take advantage of one of the internships that might be available or one of the summer opportunities that might be available. And this is not something we've actually decided we're going to raise money for yet, but talking about financial aid, that would be just wonderful. Because education is moving into the community, moving into internships to see career possibilities, moving into more and more summer research, and so likely we'll be raising money for one of those summer expectations. Absolutely. Do we recruit in inner city high schools? We recruit as far and deeply as we can, not only in this country but in the world. And we have an absolute commitment to creating diversity of class, of race, of experience, of national origin, of perspective, of interests, of talents in our class. This year's the class we just accepted this year, 2012, has 39% students of color, and it has about 8% international students. And one thing we do, and we have the socioeconomic distribution is excellent too. It's about 49% students on aid, so that means that they come from poor families, whatever backgrounds they have. But it depends how you break that down. We have a wonderful team, an amazing admissions team, who goes to schools and attracts kids, and then what I find completely brilliant is able to look at an application and tell whether that kid, even though he or she is not well prepared, even though he or she doesn't write that well, even though he or she hasn't had calculus, whether that kid is going to do well at Swarthmore. And what's phenomenal, we have something else in, is the work that we've done recently, I'm talking about the last 5 years, to make sure that the kid from the inner city school or the Appalachian school or whatever school where he or she is not well prepared for Swarthmore, and it's totally unconscionable how, as you all know, the range of education in this country in terms of how bad it gets and how broad. But what's completely as exciting as that is depressing is the fact that you take kids who we would have predicted by all of the criteria of preparedness and economic circumstances, who would have, in 5–10% of the cases, gone on from the first engineering class to the second, or Bio 1 to Bio 2, or computer science, what's called the first course, onto the second one, because they just didn't have the background and ended up moving into the humanities or moving into some of what they perceived as easier social sciences and not doing the things they really wanted at Swarthmore often, but particularly not being able to excel in areas for which their preparation really kept them back. And we've started over the last 5 years really intense effort, led by the faculty, but now with increasing staff, to give these kids the opportunity to overcome that background so that we can go to any inner city school and find kids that we know have the intelligence but don't have the preparation. And the results are totally remarkable. Lynn Moulton will be talking about it too this weekend. If you look at the percentage of kids that now, having worked with faculty who work with senior and junior students who are tutors to bring them up to the level, the speed with which they get there is phenomenal. I mean, Swarthmore students learn at an amazing pace. Well, these students absolutely learn at as amazing or more amazing pace, and the results are that there's almost no distinction in who can go on now among many of these groups. I want to add one other thing, that there are programs now in the country, one particular one called Questbridge, whose business it is. It was founded by people really committed to academics to find those underprepared but really intelligent students from inner cities and from around the country. And we have accepted 19 of the kids chosen through that program are accepted at Swarthmore. We never promise any kid that they'll be accepted, but huge numbers have applied because it gets Swarthmore known in these areas, in these schools. And then we look at the kids. And so in terms of particularly lower income recruiting and minority recruiting, those programs have helped us tremendously. How is Swarthmore preparing students to become world citizens is the question, and probably the most important question as I see it of the planning process that we're going forward. I'll obviously get to the answer as I know it. Just to mention about this planning process, I wrote you about, you know, what we're looking for in the Swarthmore of 2020, and the most important theme of that planning process to me is that this school is at an amazing position in American education. That the graduates that come out of here, in terms of the dimensions I talked about, are just really unmatched, it seems to me, in their intellectual experience, in their commitment to ethical issues, and in their commitment to the broad conditions of humanity. And I think that if you look at every aspect of the college, from AAA bond ratings to 6,200 people who applied to Swarthmore against a class of 375, to the quality of those 6,200 kids, to the quality of our faculty, to the research of our faculty, which is amazing, to our graduate entrance into business and law, and so on, it's phenomenal. So the major issue is how to keep it that way, and not how to change things, because the traditions that empower it, the intellectual tradition, the Quaker tradition, and the tradition of the small college community have to be retained. It's where we are on the market, it's what's special. But then you say, how do you make sure this special place is as effective in preparing students for a new age? And there are some internal things that we've got to deal with, like changes in enrollment, where we have huge enrollment in certain departments and not as much enrollment in others, and therefore the kids don't have the same experience across departments, and that's not right. And we can go into more details if we want. But to me, one of the most important issues is how do we prepare kids for a world that has become completely transformed in terms of its global orientation. We've begun in the last campaign, when we looked at what we should do before the last campaign, it was very confirming to look at the choices kids make across the curriculum in terms of their departmental and course selections in terms of an international world. When you looked at how many kids had taken more than 2 courses on some other culture or on international political science or on international sociology of some kind or languages and cultural studies, it was like 95%. So it's not that the kids weren't understanding the need for this, and to require it for the last 5% doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to talk about it, and we'll get 99%. So the general curriculum, having completely evolved in an international way, you take every department, economics with people working on currency, exchanges between Kenya and French Africa, and so I mean, comparing development models between Botswana and Kenya, for example. It's got everywhere. You look at the literature departments, and French literature is now African literature and Caribbean literature and French literature, and you look at environmental studies even, and there's a program in Poland to look at how they're cleaning up the Vistula River and to match that with the way you deal with the Krum in terms of same kind of biological intervention. So the whole place is international. But that doesn't mean the students are as ready for it as we might want them to be. A second thing we did is we expanded, I told you we added financial aid for international study, but now almost 50% of our students go abroad, and they can go anywhere they want. And what's really encouraging about that is the financial aid students go abroad in much greater numbers than the non-financial aid students, because the non-financial aid students have all gone abroad on their own. And so if you actually look at the percentage of kids that have spent significant time abroad, it's really wonderful. And the programs are more and more integrated when they come back with an analytic view that comes from their departments and the honor system. But one more second, then just one more point on this. But we felt other things are really important, and one of them is to increase our exposure to cultures that had not been central to the curriculum. We have really increased Chinese, such that now, I mean, when I first came, nobody wanted Chinese. I had this dumpling party in the linguistics program, and 25 kids signed up, and for 17 years there was no tenure-track position, and I came back, and there was a tenure-track position, and now there's 2, and now we're working on the 3rd, and it's the most taken language in the school. We just added Japanese last year, and that is very popular. And as you may know, one of the major priorities of the last campaign was to begin an Islamic studies program, to try to get leadership, which we have to for this nation, of students, of graduates who can really cross those cultures, Western and Islamic, with understanding and sensitivity. And the program has honestly gone wild. I mean, we hired 1 tenure-track position first in religion, then in sociology, then partial positions. We just got funding from Mellon Foundation for 1 in history. We then added a full Arabic program. 85 kids took Arabic at Swarthmore, Haverford, and Bryn Mawr last year. 65, because some of them took it last year, are taking first-year Arabic this year. All of the courses are completely overflowing, and we have to lottery people out. We have amazing faculty, and the whole Islamic Studies and Arabic program are doing beautifully. We also are increasing the number of international students we bring, and then the next step is, what is the kind of training in student life and other directions of the curriculum that we want to move to prepare our students so they're totally comfortable in whatever environment the world they're in. And we think that's central to what we're going to be thinking about next year in the planning process, and you need to send advice, anybody who has that kind of experience, because we want to be ahead of the curve. Here's NYU building a campus in Shanghai, a campus in France, a campus in Abu Dhabi, and sending a third of their faculty to those 3 campuses, and having students expected to spend a good amount of time in one or the other of those campuses, and this is going to just take off in American education. And so we really have to figure out how Swarthmore can be ahead of that curve. I'll try to answer. The question is, the question is, why am I leaving? And that I might have some understanding at the college, you would say, thank you. Why? Because we want to leave. It's an amazing place. I mean, I really believe there is no educational institution like it. I think its mission is completely distinctive. It's got an alumni body, which is all graduating from it by the truism, but is so supportive of it, and its energy and its resources, which are so absolutely necessary to the continuation of the school. And so it's the ideal job in American education. I've said this to you in my letter. And it's a very hard decision about whether to leave or not, when to step down. But truthfully, the most important thing for the next president is this place is so amazing that it sustains itself. The faculty is incredible. The students are incredible. The admission situation is incredible. The financial maintenance is incredible. So what's important is major fundraising ahead, I'm afraid. If we don't raise probably $500 million, and I could go through this and explain it to you and why, there's no way in the next, let's say, 8 or 10 years, there's no way the school can retain its excellence. The budget right now, if you just take all the tuition monies, all it pays for is essentially room and board and financial aid and faculty salaries. Nothing else does the tuition pay for. Everything else, including the salaries of 600 staff, including the maintenance of this whole place, including all the departmental expenses and the equipment, including the library, including legal fees, and so on, all has to come from the endowment. And all we get is about $55 million from the endowment each year. So think of $55 million spread over 600 staff, spread over taking care of this club head that we have, and every one of the trees, taking care of $400,000 pieces of equipment. There is no way that the faculty-student ratio can continue, that need-blind admissions can continue, that the admissions office, with its amazing commitment to reaching out across the country and what is needed to do that can continue. None of this can continue. I'm being completely honest, I always am, without this kind of next level. And speaking of just Swarthmore, then you look at the competition in the area of faculty salaries, and you look at what Amherst and Williams and Princeton and so on are offering. They all want to come. Honestly, the faculty want to come here because our students are so amazing. But we have to be able to pay them at the level that these schools are beginning to pay. So in order to do that, it has to be an 7 or 8 year campaign. There is no way out if we want to keep this school, this special school in American education. An 8-year campaign that probably will raise at least $500 million. And what the question is it right for me to try to do that now, after having been here 18 years, and I've been taught here 12, so I've got 30 years. And I really had to make a decision as to whether that's something that I can do with the same degree of energy for the next 8 years. And I think, that would be best for the school for me to do that. And if I'm going to step down, this is the time, because the president has to completely engage the priorities, learn the school, meet all of you, and meet all the other constituencies in every one of those corporations that we need to start, going to, and then run an 8 to 10 year campaign. And so I think that really is to me the major reason. And from my own point of view, I've done this with taught here 12 years and been here 18 years, and it's ideal, and I'm totally scared that I won't find something as ideal. I can't imagine how it's going to be, and I have no time to even write a CV, so I've not even looked. But I do think it's probably right. Jean is asking whether, even though there's been a good deal of progress over the years, and particularly in kind of the breadth of the curriculum and the diversity of the student population and the faculty, and in what educational opportunities have offered, there kind of comes a point where the next stage maybe shouldn't be continuing to add opportunities, add differences, add so on, but kind of consolidate and given how much a student can actually absorb, realize that as long as we do it really well, we don't have to continue to expand and extend unless we want to be a university, which we absolutely don't want to be. And my answer to that is actually something I said a little earlier. I think he's totally right, and if you look at the planning for this next campaign, as compared to the last one. In the last one, we said, where do we want to expand in terms of directions of the curriculum? And we came up with Islamic studies and film and media studies and cognitive science. And they were great additions. And then we added Japanese as well. But this campaign, as we start planning for it, the emphasis is no longer on new directions. The emphasis is on keeping this place as intellectually fine an educational institution as it's been, as it is today. And what do you have to do that still is very expensive, incredibly expensive. I'll give you an example. We move from, in enrollments from certain departments to other departments. Economics is so overwhelmed right now in terms of students that students actually can't do individual papers with faculty because there are so many students taking economics. The same thing is true in statistics and math, in certain areas of math. Well, that's wrong. You could say, okay, we should cut out X or Y. Jean might suggest that. We could cut out X or Y in order to do that. But I don't think the right thing for Swarthmore is to cut out areas that are part of the parameters now of liberal arts education, because liberal arts education has expanded to a certain degree of breadth that a student looks for in what choices are there, and that we believe is central to knowledge. So we have to supplement economics while trying to capitalize as much as possible on areas that are under-enrolled. Let's say have those faculty teach more writing, have those faculty do more independent experiences, have those faculty join interdisciplinary programs, try to be as efficient as we can. And we really do try to do that. But fundamentally, you've got to add a faculty or two to economics, a faculty or two to statistics, because otherwise, both faculty and students don't have an equal experience across the curriculum. That's an example, as opposed to saying, we've got to start a new program in industrial biology, although there is a lot of interest in mathematical biology. Buildings. It's not that we want to build something completely new. It's that if you look around Hicks and see what the engineering department looks like and realize that engineering now is just like the other areas of the curriculum and is in the honors program and expects independent projects in every seat. And when our engineering external examiners come, or when we get evaluated by the Engineering Association, they say this is the most imaginative, important program in the country in terms of fostering student-independent projects in engineering, which really build on a substructure of courses, of disciplinary courses. But there is only stairwells in which these kids can actually build their projects. I'm not kidding. I mean, go around Hicks, you'll see there are stairwells, and they're not nice stairwells. And the steps are corroded. So you have to, to keep up the college, it's not about starting, a veterinary school. It's about making sure that engineering is as fine as it's always been and it can stand in American education. So I completely sympathize with Jean. We've had this discussion once in a while over our absolutely wonderful relationship, and he's made this answer before. But I do really believe that the school is at a point of much greater sense of let's concentrate on what we do and make sure that in a world where other faculty have four courses a year to teach, and we expect 5, other faculty have this much money, and we give them this, other students have this much financial aid, and we give them this. Those are the things we really have to attend to keep the place excellent. I'm trying to be, yes, thinking on the direction of development towards the north end of the campus. There was a period of thinking that we should build a parking orchard because it would disguise the parking lot the same way you might want the dorm to be disguised. And we would have, I don't know, persimmon trees or something for global reach. But what I think actually is necessary is to think about, in the future, we'll see what comes out of the planning process, but engineering has to be, the facilities are really terrible. If you look at the Papazian Hall and you compare it to this, or you compare it to the Performing Arts Center, or you compare it to Coburg, you'll see that Papazian, where we have psychology and philosophy, is also, I mean, if you were a human subject or even a non-human subject in one of the psychology experiments, you would be repelled by the building. So we have to pay attention to Papazian, and biology in the last campaign, although it's beautifully linked to the science building, Martin has not been restored at all since I first started Martin, which was in 1974, when linguistics and psychology were Martin. So the thinking is maybe some kind of biopsych engineering building, maybe taking hits and remodeling it and extending it so it could be a biopsych engineering building, or maybe going north, which would be on the other side of Whittier Place, where the parking lot is, and attaching it to the science building somehow, or a separate building. So that's the thought. Just to follow from a question about architecture and landscape planning earlier, we certainly don't want to change the sense of the sweep of Parish Beach, of the sweep of the campus from Parish to the railroad station. We don't think the dorms have done that, intruded, hope not. But the academic complex, I think, actually is becoming more and more beautiful and certainly much more able to stimulate a sense of community by creating these quadrangles, like the quadrangle between Hicks and Trotter, or like the space between the science building and Coburg. And so using the northern part of the campus as the academic cluster, but making sure that there are enough spaces so the buildings don't feel like they dominate as opposed to the landscape dominating, I think is probably where we'll go. This will be something each of the planning committees has finished its job of saying what are the kind of priorities we're thinking about. We're going to publish all of the priorities on the web, and we'll write to all of you as to the kinds of things that are surfacing. Then we're going to spend a whole year, while I'm still here, trying to figure out what we see as the most important of those and what form they will take. And then that will be distributed. And when the new president comes in, obviously no decisions are going to be made until that person also buys into or reshapes in some ways with the community the directions of these discussions. Well, the gentleman's asked that 18 years ago we spoke yesterday in my graduation, yes, that was a little longer ago, in my inauguration talk about a commitment to strengthen the Quaker tradition at the school, and what have we done in that area. I really believe that almost everything that I've done in terms of where this school has gone has been affected and positively influenced by the Quaker tradition. We have more Quakers coming in this year. It's only 3%, but in the freshman class. We've had a Quaker provost and so on, but I don't mean in terms of those specific numbers. I mean that I really believe what the Quaker tradition for us means, or for me, are two things, or three things, I'd say. One is a real commitment to listening and to respecting and caring for the other. And we have taken that, which I don't think crossed boundaries of race and religion and sexual orientation and national origin in the way that it had over those years at Swarthmore. And we've said it must cross those things. And we must create a diverse community where everybody is listening and accepting everybody else, and where we have a range of difference in the community, which is all part of who we care for and who we learn from. The second is to say, not only should that tradition create that sense of community among diversity on the campus, but that tradition should stretch out to the broader conditions of humanity. And we should care about Darfur, and we should care about Iraq, and we should care about poverty, and we should care about environment. And what our kids are doing is incredible in terms of, here we have a war news radio program connecting with Iraq or Afghanistan every week, understanding the experience by conversation of people there, and on national public radio programs in 60 across the country, being used for the Marines to advise the Marines on cultural differences. To me, the Quaker tradition has been at the center, but I'm going third place, has been at the center of what kind of community we've built and what kind of outreach of that community these kids have really brought the college to. And thirdly, even more centrally maybe, to me the Quaker tradition speaks about, and it's my interpretation clearly, and I know it's not identity with the religion itself. It's identity with the values of the religion. Although we want to stay connected to our identity in the religion in a sense that's one of the roots of the college. But the purpose of intellectual life altogether can become very much about intellectual accomplishments for its own sake. And the sense at Swarthmore, which is so distinctive, is that intellectual life is about ultimately acquiring knowledge so you can reach those people that you need to respect and do something for them. And that ultimate sense of social responsibility is not divorced from intellectual life, but in fact is the reason for intellectual life. And the purpose of education is not to just give people allow them to fit into careers effectively and thrive for themselves. But the purpose of education is to create agents of the public good who thrive in everything they do, from the hedge fund that they run, to the legal firm that they run, to the medical research they do, to teaching about the humanities and the artistic work that they do. But at the same time, through their work and beyond, to use the education we're giving them to create a more caring world. And I think everything that's happened in this school has reaffirmed that. So that's where I see the Quaker tradition as having completely distinguished us from so many other places where that kind of ethical and moral commitment to the purposes of both intellectual life and education have not been there. And that to me is where we have to be. I mean, we have a very diverse population with very diverse religious backgrounds and many people without religious commitment. And so we're talking about a way of taking the values that come from Quakerism but transcend the human experience. The question is, can that idea appear more strongly in Swarthmore's public literature, its image? Well, I did write a graduation talk, which took me a while. By the way, graduation talks are the hardest thing for presidents. Don't become a president if you aren't willing to spend 9 months thinking about what a topic of a graduation talk should be, especially with this faculty, or this student body, or these parents. And if you ever say the same thing, again, they'll know it. Anyway, there is a talk, and it's exactly this. And I gave it last Saturday, and it's on the web. And I see it as a means of encapsulating exactly, what makes Swarthmore so special and why it's so grounded in the Quaker tradition, and I want to say the Able-Lot tradition of ours. And I think from there, we have a committee on public, on the kind of public voice of the college and how we can raise our visibility, not only to attract students. I mean, then we just turn down more students. I like to attract more students, but 6,300 students applying, average college board, which we don't count that much, over 700, or about 700 to 6,300 students, and we only take 375 in a class. So it's kind of, the idea of just trying to create more students is not the answer. Trying to set this idea in motion as a model for American education, and really to try to rattle the sense that it's all about career development or intellect for its own sake. So I am for it, I'm trying, I wrote the talk, and we'll see. He's saying he doesn't see the Quaker message in the literature. I'm saying that I tried in this talk that I wrote to say that. And I think it's important to try to differentiate exactly how Quakerism empowers the college and how it's not defining the college in terms of a religious orientation, but why the values that come from it define the college. That's what I tried to do as part of this. But I agree with you, it's not as much as it could be. Well, it isn't that, and I take your advice. Where are Swarthmore students going now, and has there been a change? I think there hasn't been as fundamental a change as people think. And what I mean by that is that there has been a sort of presumption that Swarthmoreans will, in very large proportion, go into education, into nonprofit organizations, into societal change, and very few go into the business world. It's certainly true that we are completely proud of the number of Swarthmoreans that go into the professoriate, into education, into NGOs of various kinds and commitments to social justice in the nonprofit world. But what's interesting is if you look back, like at the class of 1995, 10% went to business school, and at Amherst, 12% went to business school. And so there's been a kind of less visibility of how many people have always done this. And if you go back to alums, they may not have gotten support from the community and the values that they deserved, but they did go. I think there is more interest in business, there is more interest in finance, there is more interest in international corporations and so on than there has been. But it's never without the same commitment to justice and to creating a better world. And it's amazing when you talk to those kids and you talk about the Quaker basis or the reason for what they do. They are 100% Swarthmore. They just see that they can do it in a different way. And that, I think, is a change in terms of recognition of another path from Swarthmore. But if you look at the people going on, we've got, this is an amazing year, 2 Roses, 2 Luces, 10 Fulbrights, a huge number of other awards. These kids are just amazing, and the breadth of things that they go into, from law to medicine to academics to business to the kind of wonderful social empowerment that you're in, so you'll get people who will follow your wonderful example. It's astonishing, and each one, if you talk to them, the reasons they're going is what really counts. And we should encourage anything a kid wants to do across the whole spectrum of careers, as long as the reason is something that is consonant with the values of the school, because we really believe in those values. I think that's what's happening. Let me stop here. You've got a parade. You've got to see you all today.